Hello and welcome back to a very special episode of the MVP podcast. My name is Anthony Mero.
And I'm Phil Van Pelt. And we are super excited to have you guys back with us on the MVP podcast. We got a full slate, a full NFL season awaits us. We've been waiting for this moment. This is full circle. We are back where we met you guys with the NFL division predictions for the upcoming season. Little different this year. Instead of going an hour per division, we're going to break it down. We're going to fit two divisions in each hour. We're going to have one episode a week for you guys up until the season. Instead of going with the West Coast to start, we're going to start with the East. We're going to start with the NFC East, AFC East, and we're going to roll through it each East, South, North, and West once a week until we hit the season. Ready to bring you week one predictions. Super pumped for it. Can't wait. Excited the football's back. We got real preseason games this weekend. Super excited for that. So without further ado, we're going to get rolling with our NFC East or least, depending on how you call it. A lot of people call it the least. Predictions. We're going to go 4-1 through all these divisions. So we're going to start out with the draft position wise coveted position of number 4 in the NFC East. I think it's going to be a pretty bad record to finish as number 4 in the NFC East, but we might differ a little bit. I'm excited, Anthony. Who do you have finishing in 4th place in the East?
So, by virtue of a tiebreaker, this one taking the L in this case, I have the Washington Commanders. They had a pretty stagnant offseason. They kind of hamstrung their cap space a little bit by throwing Carson Wentz's $28 million into their books. That's not really going to help them improve at all. Ryan Fitzpatrick is gone with retirement. They lost Brandon Scherff and Landon Collins, so they kind of lose a little bit of their depth here. They didn't really add much in terms of anything. I guess a lot of this is just predicated on them bringing back that defensive magic they saw 2 years ago, where they were actually giving teams fits. Last year, it felt like we were waiting for them to come up. We were waiting. We had one game of it, and then Chase Young tears his ACL. So we were kind of robbed of what this team really could have been in the second half of the season. And they were still pretty competitive, but everybody else, I feel, at least in this division, got a little bit better from the top end of it. Like the Giants, I think, got a little bit better. I think the Eagles got a lot better. And we'll talk about the Cowboys a little later. I just don't think that the Commanders took a step forward. Their defensive linchpin will have to be back with that 2 years ago intensity. And I'm just at this point, after a year of saying next week, I'm doubting that they can do that. So not sure what I expect from them, but I have them going 6-11. Their floor and their ceiling is very tight in that range. Ceiling 8 wins, floor maybe 5. And I have them leaning towards that floor.
See, that's interesting. I don't have the Commanders in last place. I have what I think many would assume the more obvious choice for last place. I'm not as low on Carson Wentz. Okay, I shouldn't say that. I don't believe that Carson Wentz is a great quarterback. I believe they might have given up too much. He's a lot of cap space, but he does have weapons. Terry McLaurin's a great receiver.
Yep.
I'll go over that in a minute. But I think they're going to finish a little bit better. I like Ron Rivera. But I think that Carson Wentz at the end of it all will provide a little more stability than what they've had at quarterback, minus if they had Fitzpatrick, who, by the way, Fitzmagic is a legend. He threw like 6 passes, ended up cracking his hip, I believe, and got paid $10 million. So, I mean, he made out like a bandit for that. He just 6 passes and then, rode off into retirement. And obviously everyone's going to want to have that guy on as an analyst. He's a legend in his own right. Been playing forever, all the teams, the success. He has better stats in a lot of categories than various Hall of Famers do. And yet, he probably won't be in the Hall of Fame, but the guy was, a living legend for what he brought. I don't think we'll ever see a guy that's that feast or famine, right? I mean, he can bring you best quarterback in the league type games mixed with, oh man, what is that? It was a crazy career. And I'm glad I got to be a part of it too. He played for my Fins, so I was excited to see that. And everybody loves Fitzy. But I digress. We're on to the number 4. Who really will finish number 4? Come on, be real here. Tiebreaker be damned. The Giants. I don't have it that close. I think they're going to be number 4 by a landslide. They're 4-13 is how I have them finishing. 4-13. They had an okay offseason. I'm not as big on it as you are, Brian Daboll. He's going to breed a new focus on the offensive side of things, which I like. But and he brought with him Matt Breida came over, John Feliciano came over, brought over some Bills. That's where he was. Brought some Bills over to play with them in New York. I get it. Every coach does it. They weren't exactly big time players. Feliciano had a lot of playing time, but Matt Breida was there for a year. He must think it's a system fit. Feliciano played for a long time for the Bills. Obviously, I like Feliciano. He's a Cane. But I don't know how big of a difference that makes for him. It's a big, big year for Danny Dimes because let's be real. I think the jury's out. And if the training camp stuff is any prediction, I mean, he is not having a good training camp.
No, he is not.
Picks, not playing well at all. But we know he can have that random big game where he's athletic and he can make something happen. But the core of receivers to me kind of underwhelms. Kenny Golladay is, on the surface, big time. He was good with Detroit. Here we go. We got Kenny Golladay, and he had as many touchdowns last year as we did, right? 0. He didn't do anything as far as finishing a pay dirt. I mean, he had okay games, I guess, at times, but he really didn't for the amount of money they paid him. He didn't have any okay games for the amount of money they paid him. He had decent games by NFL standards at times. Kadarius Toney and Sterling Shepard are top options. I'm not sure if Sterling Shepard's even clear to play at this time. Someone might emerge, but my money's on Kadarius Toney doing that. The guy's is a playmaker, even though there was those trade rumors a couple months ago, which was weird. He's a piece for the future. You just drafted him. You reached for him to draft him. Why would you be willing to trade him? I do love their draft. Before I get to the draft, though, Saquon Barkley, another guy, it's a huge year for him. The guy went from like rookie of the year, next big running back, to he can't stay healthy. Quadzilla is going to tear the league apart. Guys can't stay healthy, and he's a walking injury. He can't produce anymore. So what's it going to be? Because especially for a running back, my gosh, that's a terrible break because this guy's career, I mean, he's going to be back up trying to make it, and thankfully he got a rookie contract that paid pretty big because he was a high draft pick. Because otherwise, if he doesn't turn around this year, he might be, riding this on trying to share reps. And that doesn't mean he can't bounce back and turn that into something. But it's going to be somewhere else. I mean, it's getting to that point where the Giants are going to move on for him. But he was top of the guy. He was in songs. People were dropping Barkley's name. It's crazy how far he's fallen. Yep, I do like their draft. Kayvon Thibodeau, I like him at Oregon, and Evan Neal too, first round pickups. That was big, and success is always in the trenches, so I do like that for them. But they're last in this division. I mean, let's be real. Like, I don't see them. I know you're tiebreaker, and you see it with the Commanders and stuff like that. But I Brian Daboll, I think he can be a good head coach. He's from New York, I believe. Stay home, coach the Giants. Cool. But it's a pivotal year. To me, it feels like a year where you're going to try to get the most out of these guys, develop a culture, build this team up, and know that unless Danny Dimes just absolutely tears the house down in this new offensive system, which he could potentially, you guys got talent if he can rein it in and show up, if Brian Daboll can rein that in and get him going on the right track and his weapons can stay healthy. Maybe Evan Neal becomes an instant impact starter on the line. Maybe to protect Dimes because he likes to turn it over. Daniel Jones. I keep calling him Danny Dimes, but Daniel Jones. All that stuff. It's what if. So it feels like to me it's a transition year where we're going to see this happen, and then we're going to see them. New quarterback next year, be drafting somebody. It's a good quarterback draft from what everybody's saying so far. Right, next year expect to be a big quarterback draft or potentially free agency. Who knows? So we'll see what they do. Feels like that for me, that a high draft pick, if you're developing a solid culture where the team doesn't quit mail-in games, I think that's what you ask for at this point. And bring a quarterback into a team that's growing next year if it's not Daniel Jones. Bright side is we'll see Tyrod Taylor. I believe we're going to see Tyrod Taylor this year, and we're going to see Tyrod do what he does and look good and consistent and capable, and then get shafted by the injury gods or Daniel Jones coming back or something happening to keep him, and then have him fall on his face or something like that, where he just has a stinker of a game. That's kind of Tyrod Taylor's career, where he'll have a decent game and you're like, all right, I think this guy can kind of keep the ship steady. He doesn't turn it over, but then everything goes wrong. Something happens, just bad breaks. But I do believe very firmly that we will see Tyrod Taylor at some point this year, if not because of performance, for sure injury, because Daniel Jones gets dinged up too. So I have the Giants in fourth place, 4-13. So now I'm assuming we're going to switch places here. So tell me why the Giants in your eyes are third place, and I'll tell you why the Commanders are third.
So I agree with a lot of what you said. The Giants still are very far away from being any level of successful, but they've taken a lot of steps in the right direction. And one of the biggest things that they did was the front office regime change, changing their GM to Joe Schoen, adding in Brian Daboll. Joe Judge was not doing a good job. He was doing horrifically. And Dayball was doing he was running some circles around out there in Buffalo. So bringing that, potentially bringing that culture in, he helped develop Josh Allen. Maybe he can do something to Daniel Jones. Obviously not nearly the same caliber of talent, but Daniel Jones is at least a very athletic person.
If you asked him coming out, you would say yes. There was a reason Daniel Jones was drafted high.
He's also very athletic. You can't teach some of the things that he can do. They also have an insurance policy, as you just mentioned, in Tyrod Taylor, who's going to be a significantly better backup than Mike Glennon or Jake Fromm. They built a better O-line, drafting your man, Evan Neal, and they picked up Mark Glowinski and John Feliciano as well. So they shored up some of their biggest needs. Right? Yeah, they shored up some big needs. Where a lot of their improvement's going to happen, though, is going to be Kadarius Toney and Kenny Golladay. You can't have 0 touchdowns. Now, maybe with a little more time in the pocket, a little bit more offensive ingenuity, ingenuity from Dayball, we'll see some success from these guys. Both of them combined, Golladay and Toney had 0 touchdowns. If Saquon Barkley can be healthy, at this point, I'm writing him off. I don't think he's going to be what he showed early in his career. But if he can show something, just have some kind of resurgence for your career at all, it can push them to at least a 6-win season. But the biggest thing for this season isn't really them being successful. It's the foundation that they're building. They're creating something here, and it shows that they're taking the initiative to make the right decisions. They're winning the battle in the trenches, as you just mentioned. And hopefully they can continue to build on what they just started. I don't know. I feel like they've done a lot of.
That's what I said. It's a culture. It's a culture thing. It's a culture move. You instill this. You try to get guys to play, get the thing going for next year to have a good year. Build upon that. You build it from the ground up. Could take a couple of years. It could go faster than you think. But hey, a good draft pick or bad draft pick, depending on how you view it, but a bad finish equaling a good draft pick, if you can parlay that into a impact player and not miss on the pick, that's not bad. That's a good thing to have with money that they'll inevitably have. You know, they're not going to have really anybody they got to pay. So all that stuff is good. I mean, it makes sense. You said what I said. I just believe that I believe that their ceiling is a little lower, and it's the NFL.
Yeah. I mean, they had 4 wins last year, right? Like, are they going to stay the same?
Where did they get better? I mean, they drafted well, but the draft picks still have to show up. That's not an instant, you can assume, yes, everybody is saying that. Yes, we drafted this. And in everybody's mind, they're better because of it, but not all of them will pan out. And for the thing, Daniel Jones was drafted higher than Josh Allen. He was taken 6th. Josh Allen was taken 7th. So I'm just saying.
Pick. That's a bad pick. What a miss. Yeah,
no, I mean, not the same year, but look, in the draft, he was taken 6th because of these traits that he showed. And a lot of the time that doesn't equate, but Josh Allen did. He played nowhere. He played at Wyoming. Daniel Jones played at Duke, I believe. So how did that translate? I don't know. I mean, Daniel Jones is still looking, but it's one of those things where Daniel Jones does give me vibes that he could hang on. He could hang on and potentially show up like Alex Smith did, where he was written off. He wasn't a good player for a long time. And then he got the right system around him and he ended up performing and being a solid quarterback. And they went under the Chiefs and did really well. So it's hard to say that his career is done. I don't necessarily believe it. The right coach can help to turn you around. I just think that I got to see it. And I just think the ceiling's pretty low for these guys. So for me, the whole thing with the Commanders, everything comes down to Wentz. You talked about it, touched on it. He's still a talented guy, but the thing that haunts everybody is the last time we saw this guy he was putting up a one score, 1 interception game in a must win, completely fall on your face, nothing to play for, but you got to beat him. Jags team beat you and took it to you because for whatever reason, the Jags play the Colts really well. And that's what we have. That's the taste in our mouth that we have of Carson Wentz. Not a good performance at all. And a second, they gave up to trade for him. The Commanders did. They gave up a second and a third and another third that becomes a second if he plays more than 70% of the games, which is similar to what they did with the Colts trade from the Eagles to Philadelphia, where that became a first-round pick if he played more than 75% of the games. Well, the Eagles got the better end of that deal because it turned into a first-round pick. I remember we talked about it at the beginning of last season. There was no way he was going to play that many games because the guy's a walking injury. It cost him a potential MVP that year. He could have won MVP, but he got hurt. They went out and won the Super Bowl with Nick Foles, Philadelphia hero. The one guy who only plays good in one team. He's the Al Horford in the NBA. Al Horford's the Nick Foles of the NFL, right? I mean, of the NBA. And then, so that's what it is. Like Al Horford only plays well when he's in Boston. And then the same thing with Nick Foles. He only plays well in Philly, he has these historic performances, but the rest of the time, the guy's, it's hard to roster him. But hey, I said it then, they should have kept Foles. Traded Wentz because they ended up doing it anyway. At that time, I think you could have relayed Wentz into 2 first-round picks, and the Eagles would have got the last lap. So they should have done that. They hung on to him and got rid of Foles. It was the only place that Foles plays well. But I think that that's too much to give up for Wentz. But I think the guy's still a capable quarterback. I think that McLaurin is a big-time receiver. I think he's a top 15 guy. Put over 1,000 yards last year, 5 touchdowns. Antonio Gibson, sneaky good running back. Defensive line is great. They're getting Chase Young back. You mentioned that earlier. That helps even more. I think second year, the guy was a big time talent coming out. So obviously we expect that. He had a good rookie year, and then things kind of fell apart. Obviously, you get injured, stuff like that. So you have or the year before he got injured, or the year before was his rookie. So, I think that this is a guy with enough offseason to heal, get better, and come out and play his potential. The guy's got big time potential. He reminds me of Jadeveon Clowney just because of his build, really, who was kind of made a career out of being more of an edge setter than a pass rusher, even though he's a decent pass rusher. But that ended up not really being his game, but he's a solid NFL player. I think Chase Young's a little bit better getting to the passer. That defensive line is good. We talked about Montez Sweat. I think Ron Rivera is a damn good coach, though. I think Rivera is a very good coach. So on that alone and talent that they have, I think that they get to 8 wins. And the NFC is a weaker division. The conference. The NFC across the board is weaker than the AFC is. I think that helps them. They need a guy at quarterback, the guy at quarterback. This feels very similar to what I just said the Giants are going to do. I think that they're going to use this as a potential pivot year. Again, an attempt to fill in, copy and paste, just take a guy, put him in. We have a team that I think can do well. A quarterback might help us, the right piece. If we can find the right piece, lift us to this next level we're looking to be at. But I think that this is a team who has talent, and we'll see what Wentz does. But I think they finish at 8-9. I think they just right under 500, and that's because the NFC is weaker, and they have pieces around that team. Again, I think that this is a good year to finish wherever they finish, do as well as they can, and then go get your own guy, because it feels like Fitzpatrick, and we're doing this thing last year, and they've done it in the past, where it's like, go have a guy that you drafted that you want to commit to for a little bit. I can't really remember that since, RG3 and Kirk Cousins were in Washington. And now we just are stuck in this thing, because who thinks Wentz is the long-term guy for him? He hopes so. And I hope he does too, because it's not like, why do we hate Wentz? We don't hate Carson Wentz, but I think things are going to change a lot. And if they fall on their face, it could mean Ron Rivera loses his job. I just think that, they had a decent year last year. They were in the conversation at the end, still fighting for something to play for when no one thought that they did. Similar to the Eagles, all of a sudden came out of nowhere. But those two had 2 options when we were doing our predictions and our reviews, and they kind of went separate ways. Things kind of fell apart for the Commanders, and they came together for the Eagles enough to make the playoffs. And, not really. I didn't play well. They were over their head. But then, the Eagles, they got there. The Commanders didn't. And I think that there's enough there for them to go 8-9.
Wow. All right, I see it.
Coaching-wise, that's it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm leaning towards their floor. That was the ceiling I had for them. So I'm surprised, but anything can happen any given Sunday, right? But number 2, you were mentioning the Eagles. I got the Eagles taking the number 2 spot. I think they have a pretty medium floor, but a really high ceiling. Worst case, I see them as going 7-10. I think the best they can be is 11-6, but I have them going 10-7. They were a run team last season with 56 more rush attempts than passes. They had an elite RPO that was just dominant. A huge reason was because of their second half schedule weakness, winning 6 of their last 8 games. They were playing really downed opponents, but they had a phenomenal offseason. They added A.J. Brown from the Titans, which will help diversify their offense a little bit. Their defense will be better because they prioritize it in the draft and by signing Hassan Reddick, an immediate impact player who has 23.5 sacks over the last 2 seasons, which is the 5th most in the NFL. They added James Bradbury, probably the best player the Giants had to offer, shore up their secondary. They added Kaiser White, a solid linebacker from my Chargers. They've been quietly making moves, and I expect them to have a solid year this year. one of the best things, if not the best O-lines in the league, helps them with their diverse attack. They have a good rushing attack with Miles Sanders and Boston Scott. And now they have a legit receiver duo in A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. It's going to be dangerous if Hurts can take a step in the right direction as a quarterback, not as an athlete, right? They leaned into that run game because of his indecisions. He makes bad choices sometimes as a passer. He's not the most accurate guy in the world, but he shows flashes of it. If he can continue to get a little bit better this season and become more of a quarterback, less of an athlete, we can actually see this team make some serious noise. And I wouldn't be surprised if they take the top spot of this division if they do so.
Yeah, I thought you and I would differ. I thought you'd be high on the Eagles. I am high on the Eagles. I think I'm exactly the same as you. I have the Eagles finishing 10-7. And that's weird because I assume going into it that you would have the Eagles pegged at number one with the offensive or with the moves that they've made offensively, defensively. And I mean, you mentioned James Bradbury. That's a double because you steal him from the division. So that helps. I just think the Eagles, to me, they're a weird team. So they went from bad to the playoffs in a year. So, I mean, can they sustain that? That's a big question. Their draft day exploits were the biggest part of their offseason. You know, adding A.J. Brown, a big-time deal. And they also snagged Jordan Davis. He's a monster out of Georgia, 6'6", 340. So he's a big dude. A lot of positive things coming out of camp about him. I just don't think they've embraced Hurts all that much, even though they've added the pieces they've added, right? They have arguably the best offensive line in football. And you got Devontae Smith now paired with A.J. Brown, and you got Dallas Goedert out there. Solid receiving core. Boston Scott, Miles Sanders. I like them just like you do. I mentioned the offensive line. It's one of the best in football. But Hurts, especially, too, can he take that step? But from all reports, he's struggled in camp. Now, that's why camp exists. You're supposed to make mistakes. If you make mistakes, this is when you want to make them.
Yep.
You're going to try a throw that you're not sure about, timing with your receiver, force it in. There's nothing. You can take those risks in camp because there's no repercussions. You can throw it to the defense. There's no repercussions. You don't want to, but that's how you practice that, right? I mean, maybe he's going to be here at this point, so I'm going to throw it now. Oh, it didn't work out. So now I know because I failed that I have to throw it at this point, chances are, right? Now, not all guys are the same speed, reaction, but, you know, that's how you get timing down. That's how the game works. But can he stop himself from making those decisions, those poor decisions? Because he's the ultimate thing here. I think the Eagles have a very talented roster, but do these moves help, or do we get these boom or bust games consistently from Jalen Hurts where it's like, wow, okay, I think he's the guy. Oh, okay. He, was completed in 42% of his passes and he's, threw a couple picks and a touchdown, but then he ran for 100 yards. So you're like, okay, maybe, but through the air, he just wasn't getting it done. So what are we going to see out of Jalen Hurts? That's the biggest question. That is the determining factor here. I think that the Eagles, though, are much closer than the other two teams, obviously, with that solid roster. So if Hurts doesn't do it, they're going to move off of him quick. This is an extended experiment. He played better than people thought, so they're giving him more time, but yet it doesn't feel like other quarterback situations in the league where it's like, this guy really can do it. I feel like for whatever reason, they don't believe that Hurts can really do it. Like they took him. Okay, he'll start. It was like the Tim Tebow thing. Oh, he's winning, but can he really do it? Now he has these games. Now, how much do you, prioritize winning? You always prioritize winning, but if you're winning because it just seems like this guy can somehow figure out a way to get it done, but statistically you're not seeing the proof and completion percentage or things like that, then there's got to be something here. I think they can move off of him fairly quickly if that's the case. Meaning next year, obviously they're going to roll this year, but I think the roster honestly could be the best in the NFC East. I think it gives them one more win than last year. I have them going 10-7, which leads us to our division prediction of finishing first in the NFC East is the Cowboys. Which I didn't think you'd have. I mean, I think I have the Cowboys finishing, but in an interesting way. So what do you have them?
So I have the Cowboys finishing. I think their floor is pretty low. I think they could be 7-10. They lost so much this offseason. You lost Randy Gregory. You lost La'el Collins, who only allowed 2 sacks last season. The Dolphins stole Connor Williams. They traded Amari Cooper to the Browns, and they still have depth at the receiver position, but they had a 3-headed
Cedric Wilson's
monster.
gone to my fans too.
Cedric Wilson, also to your fence. Like they lost so much and they can't replace it. All they basically did was re-sign what was left and overpay most of it. They overpaid Gallup, they overpaid Dalton Schultz. I think that now they kind of find themselves in a weird situation, but they still have top end talent. I don't want to trash what's left of that roster. It's still
They
very,
only
very good.
overpaid. They only overpaid Dalton Schultz because he's on a franchise tag. So he's
on a
making
franchise tag.
high average, but they didn't pay him anything. He's just franchised and they didn't agree yet. So it's a lot of money for a guy like, but he's a good talent, but I think they just want to see it again from Schultz.
You got to prove it deal. But I have them going 11-6, with the potential to be 10-7 as well, winning a tiebreaker for the Eagles. But I'm gonna stick with 11-6. Can't have two records here. So it's just that they lost so much. It's huge, especially at the receiver position. Now Michael Gallup and CeeDee Lamb are their two options, who are still a phenomenal duo. But by no means are they bad. But there's going to be a potential drop off. There's also going to be the potential drop off of Zeke, another year of mileage. We already saw some drop from him. Pollard was sneaking minutes away from him at the rush position. Like, they're still a good team, but the division got better. I can't see them getting another 12-win year.
I think the Eagles got better. I don't think the division necessarily got better. The Eagles did get better, like I mentioned. I have the Cowboys going 10-7. You had a tie at the bottom. I have a tie at the top. I think the Cowboys are going to win this with a tiebreaker before the Eagles potentially, but depending on what the Cowboys do for moves here, the Eagles potentially take it back. The Eagles could take the division back next year. This feels like, again, one of those years, this is kind of a year in limbo where the Cowboys they've been at the top here and we're seeing it kind of fall back. You're right. They did lose a lot. They lost a lot for a team here to be like, okay, we're going to keep these guys where we're keeping them. I mean, based on what? Like, these guys lost so much and everybody loves to clown the Cowboys, America's team. I don't believe that they're America's team by any stretch, right? But I got to say that I think they have enough this year to get it done. I mean, losing La'el Collins and Connor Williams are not good. They were two of their better offensive linemen grade-wise. And obviously, La'el Collins, he made Cincinnati happy. I'm happy to have Connor Williams in Miami. And they lost Cedric Wilson, like we talked about. But you said it. CeeDee Lamb and Michael Gallup are good receivers. A big thing that people aren't talking about is Randy Gregory. They lost Randy Gregory on the defensive side to Denver. That whole fiasco, that fell apart, and he ends up signing with the Broncos. I like Randy Gregory, and I think that his career in Dallas is probably a little underappreciated. Well, maybe not to Cowboys fans, maybe just for the general public, but I think that he made things, having a guy like that on the line makes things easier for a guy like Micah Parsons, who can get after the passer and everything else too. So his job is going to be a little harder just based on not having that talent in front, because that helps. You have a dominant guy on the defensive line. But with that, again, on defense, I believe that Trayvon Diggs, not Stephon Diggs. Trayvon Diggs is a little overpraised to me. I think that Diggs is as far as, leading with interceptions. I get that he took the ball away, but he gave up a lot in coverage, yards and everything. So that's why I'm not sold on him as a top corner. He got a lot of picks, and that's great. You want a guy that can take the ball away, but it's not like when Xavier Howard did it 2 years ago. He's still leading at the top in coverage grade in a lot of areas. Most areas, he's like number one lockdown grade, right behind Jay Alexander when the season finished. This guy was giving up yards. He was just happening to turn the ball over. Well, guess what? That's not going to happen all the time. You're not going to get the ball back that consistently. And he can break a game. He can switch a game because he can do that, right? He can get the ball, but he's not going to double-digit interceptions again. If he does and he proves me wrong, sweet. That's awesome. And the Cowboys will take it, and that'll be huge. But so that playmaking ability, kind of feast or famine with him right now. I think he'll get better in the offseason, locking things down. But that reward can turn to risk too if you break on a ball and miss, and all of a sudden it's going the other way. So you got Micah Parsons, who can break on defense, who can flip a game on defense. And you got Trayvon Diggs, who can because of his turnover ability, even though I'm not sold on him as a top corner. Those guys can do it. I feel like this is a big transition year where we could see it. But the bottom line is, I'm also, let me pivot back here. Mike McCarthy, I'm not sold on Mike McCarthy as a head coach. I think we could see him gone. Even if the Cowboys do well, get to the playoffs, they flame out right away. I think McCarthy's gone.
That seat is
and
hot.
It's a transition year where if they don't make the right move, I think it's going to be the Eagles division next year, as long as they make the right move if Hurts isn't the guy. That's what it all comes down to. But I believe that both those teams are going to be solid. I just think the Cowboys are going to take it by virtue of a tiebreaker. And honestly, game to game, Dak Prescott's the best quarterback in this division. So he gives you the best chance to win on a game-to-game basis of any quarterback in this division. And that's why I have the faith that even though I think they'll finish with the same record, he gets a win and it's a conference win, or maybe he sweeps the Eagles. But there's something there where I just believe it's enough to get it done this year. 10-7, both 10-7. We'll finish it out, and they'll get the win. I could still the Eagles. I could still see them being a playoff team. But you're right. I think the Cowboys could potentially all of a sudden, what they've lost in the coaching staff, they could fall. Before you know it, all of a sudden they have 7 wins. I mean, that wouldn't be shocking either. I'm just putting one last effort until I see them make the right changes next year. I still think they have enough, but if it doesn't come together this year, they got to make moves. So that's our division, NFC East wise, guys, for the first half of the show. Giants, Commanders, Eagles, Cowboys. That's how it's finishing, despite what Anthony said.
I think the Giants are going to do better than you think. All right, so now let's go to your division, the AFC East. Starting off at number 4, I think this is going to bring some joy to your heart. I have the Patriots being at the bottom of the division, going a solid 6-11. Pats, honestly, they took a huge step back. They lost a lot. Speaking of bad OTAs, we were talking about Daniel Jones. We were talking about Jalen Hurts. Mac Jones, despite being in probably the best shape of his life, his career has looked poor, to say the least. Maybe it's the adjustment to like his new form. You lose the weight. Your arm feels a little different now because now it's like a little lighter when you're throwing that football. But he's throwing it everywhere. He just doesn't have the accuracy. It's not really a good start. And that's to match the losses of Kyle Van Noy and J.C. Jackson. Jackson, by the way, going to my Chargers, being a massive loss, having led the league in total interceptions over the last 3 seasons combined. Replacing him with an aged Malcolm Butler with an addition of Jabril Peppers won't stop that bleeding. And their sidelines won't be much clearer either, especially in the coaching positions. Despite having Bill Belichick at the helm, Josh McDaniels is now out. He's on the Raiders. They brought back Joe Judge, and they still don't have clear coordinators. Who's going to be calling plays? Is it just going to be Bill? Is he going to be everywhere? Is he going to do all of it? It's just a really messy situation. There is a bright spot for them, though, and they addressed the need from last season, too. They added Devontae Parker. They drafted Tyquan Thornton to shore up their receiving core, but they still have a lot of work to do to kind of cut out what this team is going to look like for this season. I just don't see the image. Maybe Bill does, and he's going to show everybody why he's the GOAT. I don't know, but I think they're going to finish this season 6-11.
Yeah, and honestly, the way they ended the season, getting absolutely, shellacked. My fans took it to them in the last game of the season, and then they went up, into Buffalo and just got hammered. Just got destroyed by the Bills.
Yeah.
So, I agree. This team has not gotten better. All the reports you've heard out of training camp is that, Devontae Parker isn't getting, separation. I like Devontae Parker in Miami a lot. He's a big-time contested catch specialist, and he might need to be if they're not getting separation like that. And that's all you got out there in New England. And they've had a hard time getting receivers down there, or up there, I should say. Hard time getting guys, and that's been Bill Belichick's bugaboo. I guess I'll say he's not a good drafter of offensive talent. And he had Tom Brady, and Tom Brady for a long time covered up those wounds and made things better because it was a well-oiled machine that made everybody better. And will Mac Jones do that? To be fair, it's not fair to come in and expect Mac Jones to be Brady or anything like that because it's huge shoes to fill. Yeah. But I think the whole next man up mentality is probably going to fade a little bit for New England. And I agree with you that it's falling apart. I don't have them finishing in last place. For me, my 4th is the Jets, finishing at 6-11. I think the Jets made a lot of improvements across the board. They did for sure. They had a big name brand draft, lots of big names. Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson. They had Sauce coming over from Cincinnati. Sauce Gardner, excuse me. So never allowed a touchdown in his college career, which is pretty big time. They're going to go after him week 1. Where the Jets are playing, I think they open against somebody against them in the North, and that they're going to go after him because they want to break that, immediately. Let's see, who do the Jets open with? Jets season.
They start with the Ravens.
They do. So they're going to go right after him. They're going to go right after that guy and make it prove it. So Ravens, this should be a win for the Ravens, you would think. They do have the Browns the next week. That's potential, grab an upset. No Deshaun Watson. We don't know what's going on with the Browns. The Browns just lost Jakeem Grant today to an injury, who was, factoring in as he was in Miami. He's a special teams threat that he's either turning the ball over on special teams or he's scoring a touchdown. So bit inconsistent, but the dude blew his Achilles. That sucks. Hate to see that.
Yeah.
But on the injury side of things, doesn't make it any easier for the Jets because Mekhi Becton, their big left tackle, their talented young offensive line with a lot of promise that I thought could potentially take another step forward, which would be big for them because they have a great defensive line. And to add to that too, defensive line, they get Carl Lawson back this year. That's a big, big boom. They didn't have him last year because he blew his Achilles. They had CJ Uzomah at tight end. That's big. Does Zach Wilson take that leap this year? That offensive line needs to be the reason he does because they got a lot of talent, but you lose Mekhi Becton again. He broke his kneecap or whatever we saw. He's a big, big dude. Apparently he's out for the season. We're not going to see him again. Sets back a lot of stuff. The guy's still talented. He could potentially do it next year and everybody forgets about it. But that's a blow. That's a blow that a team that, they have a young quarterback like that is still improving and learning and growing. They added weapons, but that's hard. That's hard. You need a Mekhi Becton to take that next step. 6-11 is where I have them. I just don't think that they are. Now, I didn't know this when I predicted this. So I did finish these predictions up last night. Today, the news came through. Mekhi Becton broke his knee cap as far as what I've seen. So at that point, makes it a little easy for me to commit to fourth place for them, although better than last year. 6-11, I think they're making the right moves. They're moving in the right direction. I don't have the Pats far above them, though, in third place, but it's hard for me to pick against Belichick. But before that, tell me why you think the Jets are going to be third, because that's got to be who you have in third place.
100% is who I have in third place. The Jets, you said it, man. They're pushing in the right direction. Yeah, Mekhi Becton's down, but they also brought on Laken Tomlinson from the Niners, so they shored up their O-line. Even without Mekhi Becton, they didn't have him at all last season. They still had a pretty good O-line, so it's kind of hard to just rotate him. Obviously, you want to see him grow and develop. He could be a phenomenal cornerstone piece. Yeah, they did.
He's a high pick, and he's a guy that needs to grow and become that. But what's his face? Who played for him last? George Font. I believe they got him last year, and he was solid. I mean, it's kind of not been his career, but he was solid for the Jets last year. So I think that that's, he's a solid left tackle, but the idea would have been that Mekhi became that guy and potentially plug Ponton somewhere else too. But again,
it's a guy that you want to have on your team. You want to see him grow and develop to become that dude, that franchise cornerstone for your O-line, protecting your quarterback for his career as long as he's good. And then his just now 2 years gone from his career, second and third year. So he's all you have now to base everything on is his rookie season, and a lot of it is predicated on his weight. Right, he's too heavy. And that's kind of been his criticism going into the league and leading into 3 years now. And it's kind of bit him on the bottom. But regardless from him, they all started up their defense. They had a solid front four. We talked about their front four, the really good run stop defense. But they added DJ Reed and Sauce Gardner, some solid corners. So now they kind of tightened out the airspace a little bit. They added CJ Uzomah, as you mentioned, who was Mr. Reliable, perpetual savior for the Bengals last season, especially through their miracle playoff run. And they also added Tyler Conklin from Minnesota. So now they have a 2 tight end punch, which is pretty dope. Zach Wilson obviously had a horrible start to his season, his career, but he put on 13 pounds of muscle. So he's 221 now, which is pretty respectable. And even though there's some early OTA concerns about his form and stuff, he did still improve towards the end of the season. In December, I believe he had 5 touchdowns, had 2 interceptions, which is a respectable ratio. Still not great, but it's okay, especially with how bad he was to start the season. He still has a lot of work to do. It just feels like the franchise turned a bit of a corner this year, entering this offseason, where they did a lot of things to not end their playoff drought this year. But next year, the year after that, we might be talking about the Jets with some more respect. It feels kind of good. There's some traction for them. And a really under-the-radar move, bringing in Joe Flacco to kind of mentor this young team. I was in the Super Bowl. I won a Super Bowl MVP. Show these guys what to do, how to maintain themselves, how to be responsible players and responsible adults entering. Like, a lot of this team is young, entering this field and just kind of pushing them in the right direction. Having that voice in a locker room cannot be understated.
Bringing back Joe Flacco, because he was already there. So that's yeah, maybe, but Joe Flacco hasn't done anything when he was in New York. He got shut out a couple times, and yeah, I don't know. I know what you mean. I get it. I get what you're trying to lean towards, but
yeah, it's the voice.
That whole thing with Joe Flacco is kind of, it's past. I don't know that he gives that impact like people think or what you would assume, because I appreciate where you're trying to go with that. I think that matters in sports, kind of lead by example thing, but I don't think, Joe Flacco is not Tom Brady coming in, switching the stuff up there for the Jets, even though, he's been there before. So that's not his MO. For me, Third place is the Patriots. Patriots with a losing record just sounds weird, right? In the last 20 years, we haven't seen that. But I haven't gone 7-9. No one thought we'd see this day here. You know, I think that the roster's lost too much. I mentioned earlier, Devontae Parker struggling in camp, Mac Jones struggling in camp. They got rid of N'Keal Harry. That's good. It's a good thing. You know, like I said, Parker is a big talent, but he's been shut down so far. There's a reason the Finns traded him in division. If they didn't think they have to assume what they're looking at is not a threat in New England, because they haven't any trouble beating them. And, you know, these guys have seen Devontae Parker, and all the camp reports I read is for years, we saw Devontae Parker go up against Xavier Howard and get shut down. Howard knows how to guard him. You trade a guy into division because you're confident. You know, Parker can make plays. Absolutely. I was a big Parker fan. I think he will make plays at times, but he's far and away their best. And he also is not exactly reliable, misses a lot of games every single year. The Bills beat the hell out of him, like I talked about, after they lost to my Finns in the final game of the season. They go out. What do? What does that do to the team's psyche? Their first round pick was an FCS guard. Bringing the first round pick out of Chattanooga, right? Cole Strange. So he's going in his first game. He's going to go from FCS level competition for everybody out here. It's like, you know, Cat Grizz level competition to not even big time college football. These guys can translate and become big time players, but at a very critical piece, you're protecting your quarterback and you're going against NFL talent right away. This guy could be good. I think that Bill Belichick's going to get the most out of him. He always does. I think that it's a reach, though. I don't know that he'll be great right away. Maybe he surprises some people, but either way, you had Shaq Mason, a great guard. So what do? You trade him out. Great pickup for the Bucs. They lost Alex Kappa to the Bengals, and they get Shaq Mason to come down. So immediately, okay, the Bucs are happy with it. They get a good guard, but that doesn't. The Patriots it's this next man up. Will always have somebody. Eventually, that's going to catch up with you. You can't just keep doing that. Tom Brady was a bigger piece of that than we thought. A lot of people thought it was Bill. It's kind of looking like it was Brady for a long time, because now look at what he did with the Bucs and look at how this is trending. And if these predictions are correct, and what a lot of people feel like the Pats are really starting to slip here. They need an upgrade at linebacker. Van Noy signed with the Chargers. He left. He's bouncing around, was with the Finns, got cut. Patriots back home with the Patriots, ends up getting cut. Dante Hightower. These guys are all older. They need an upgrade. They lost. And that Bills game helped expose the linebacker. They're just, you know, as far as those guys aren't fleet-footed anymore, the linebacker position needed it. And J.C. Jackson, they lost him, right? You mentioned earlier with the Chargers. Maybe he's a Patriots player that is successful there and then goes somewhere else and sucks. But the bottom line is he was successful there. So that's a piece you're going to have to replace. So even if he goes somewhere else and doesn't do it because it's a Patriot thing, he can still obviously do it in the system he was in. So pay the guy, keep him, and keep your homegrown talent. But it's just a Bill Belichick thing. Next man up. We will always get somebody. We will always replace it. And it's worked. And it worked because you had Brady and you had a well-oiled machine that figured out how to distribute the ball. Slant, seam pass, draw, counter. It's the same plays over and over again, but you have guys that can get open and pick apart a zone. Gronkowski, hook pass, or all of a sudden he's running a little seam, and you have guys occasionally, they don't have a lot of deep threats outside of those years with Randy Moss, but you'd have guys that could go deep and catch a defense sleeping because you're beating them to death with the run and these little chunk plays. And all of a sudden they drill you, and they were the perfect team. They epitomized just offensive perfection as far as how they move the ball. Similar stuff. You see every game, it's the same stuff, and they had their MO and they followed it well, and they killed with it for a lot of years. But I think the Patriots is starting to fall apart, and they're going to be down for a little bit because the two teams in front of them have talented rosters and look like they're going to be in that position for a while with the way the rosters are built. And not that Mac Jones can't potentially be the guy there for a long time, but they took too big of a step back. And I don't know if it's Bill Belichick's stubbornness or unwillingness to, move off of, maybe I'm not always right. Maybe that's kind of what it feels like here. But I mean, even now, their old defensive coordinator is the one calling plays. We don't even know who their offensive coordinator is.
Yep.
Is Matt Patricia calling plays, who's defensive coordinator, then a head coach that failed? What the hell is happening? Maybe that's why stuff is so up in the air. And again, the Patriots will probably have a game where they beat the hell out of someone. And then they'll have a game where they get the hell beat out of them potentially. Still don't think it's going to be typical New England consistent that we've seen. And I am finishing 7-9. So one game above the Jets, but that's mostly just based out of respect. I do think the Jets will be better. The Mekhi Becton thing, I do think is a big injury, but Again,
You mean 7-10, or you want to go 8-9?
7-10. 7-10. Yeah, that's old football coming out of me. Sorry about that, guys. 7-9 was the old record. So I'm still getting used. We had a year this new season, extra games. So that's where my mind's at. 7-9 is what I will say probably for a while, because that is a record. Anything like that, 8-8, 8-9, 9-8 still feels weird.
Feels weird, yeah.
13-3 still feels right to me. That's those kinds of records. It's not. It's weird, the extra game. So I just, out of habit, force of habit. My wife's least favorite saying, force of habit. it's that I love to follow that. I will get used to it. I wanted to call the Commanders the football team a bunch when I was putting this together too.
I missed the football team already. All
I
right,
know. I want to call them the Redskins, because that's what they were for years. And then, the Commanders.
I just hate the Commanders name.
Team. Yeah, it's not a great name. Not a great name. But we move on with our predictions of thinking the Patriots and the Jets are not going to be super great. But for the Jets, it's a step in the right direction. So who do you have finishing in second place?
I have your Finns finishing second place. I was struggling where I should place them, because they have a rough start to the season. I wouldn't be surprised to see them start 1-3, getting used to a new system, getting everybody in the right positions, figuring things out, building that continuity of a roster. But I have them finishing the season at 10-7. I think their ceiling can be as high as 12-5. Their floor can be as low as 9. I don't think they're going to drop much lower than 9. This is one of the most talented rosters in the league right now. They had probably the best offseason up to date. They upgraded their O-line, which was obviously horrible last year. I believe it was the worst ranked one in the entire NFL. You add Teron Armstead, a top 5 left tackle, probably a top 3 left tackle to protect Tua, and his blind spot is going to be huge. You add Tyreek Hill.
Not his blind spot. He's left-handed.
Oh, he's a lefty. Sorry.
Yeah. No, it's a blind. That's the blind spot for football, but he's left-handed. But either way, that's a guy that good makes the whole line better. I mean, it does.
He makes everybody's job easier. You add Tyreek Hill, one of the best receivers in the entire sport. It's going to be great. You create a top receiver duo in the entire league now with Hill and Waddle. Waddle had one of the most historic rookie seasons ever. And you brought on what you didn't have last year. You didn't have a run game. Now you have a 3-headed monster in Mostert, Edmonds, and Sony Michel that creates an actual dynamic situation offensively that you didn't have before. You have options. You have choices. Your defense was already elite. You had a bunch of free agents in defense, and you brought all of them back, including Agba. And then you add Melvin Ingram to that list. It's just icing on the cake. Putting it together is going to be the hard part, right? Making it all work. This is a lot of talent on both ends, and you have an offensive-minded coach in Mike McDaniel. Can he be creative outside of Shanahan's system? Can he keep the players up with his schemes? Can Tua be that guy, right? Those are the questions they have to answer, but it's leaning yes. Everything seems to be working out right now. And maybe after they go through a small rough patch, they have an easy game against the Jets after that potential 1-3 start. Then they get another medium test with the Vikings and then the Steelers. That's where they're really going to start, in my mind, shooting off, where it's okay, this team's actually for real. Plus, you have an insurance policy. You signed Teddy Bridgewater, which is probably going to be one of the best backup quarterbacks in the entire league right now. So Finns, 10-7, second best team in this division. Division.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with what a lot of what you said, and I mean, I'm used to that. So if what you say comes true, where a slow start translates into a crazy win streak, I mean, hell, I've seen that for the last couple of years. Even then, even when the whole, the first year, Brian Flores' first year, we started out 0-6, 0-7, and then ended up going 5-4 in the last couple games there, in the last 9 games. So we had a winning record over the last 9 games. Got that team with completely stripped of talent to end up, being in a position to, to finish the season strong. The next year, I think they started 1-3 and flipped that into 10-6. And last year they ended up 9-8. And again, you're talking about 2 years in a row there where the offensive line was last year it was graded as the worst. But yeah, they're still finding a way to get all the juice out of that and finish with a winning record. In the last 2 years, they're ready to take that step. Now you have an offensive-minded head coach. Forget about all the additions. The additions are huge, but you have a coach that actually embraces the quarterback and is going to set him up in a position to succeed, which from what we're hearing and what we saw was not the case. The back and forth with Brian Flores, the not making no interest, making no effort at all to improve the offensive line or the weapons around Tua, just happened to fall into Jalen Waddle. Gesicki's turned into a great tight end. But the run game, there was nothing done to help this guy, but yet he's finding a way to guide his team to wins. And you mentioned the offseason, though. I mean, go back to that. Obviously, I'm very excited about what McDaniel brings. He's one of the most aggressive and innovative minds on the offensive side of the football as far as the run game goes. And now you have Mostert, Edmonds, Sony Michel, but you still got Ahmed and Myles Gaskin. And I think that there's a place for at least one of those guys on this team. Running backs can get hurt. It's a big, it's a violent position to play. These guys take more hits than anyone. But when you break this down, everything is set up like you said. The secondary might be the best in football. Adding Connor Williams and Teron Armstead is a huge boost on that offensive line, makes it immediately better. Teron Armstead is arguably the best tackle in football when he's healthy and when he's doing his thing. And, it's our gain is the Saints' loss when it comes to that. The guy is big time. He will make that whole thing better. Look at Quentin Nelson with the Colts. He came in. He's one of the best guards in football. He'll be a Hall of Famer one day. And he made that whole offensive line better overnight. So these guys, one piece can change. It's lead by example. It's what you were saying earlier. These guys they learn this technique, they get better. And that side is shored up. 9 times out of 10, that guy's going to make the play. And these pass rushers are great. They bring more from that side. You can chip, whatever. But having that guy is totally underrated. As much as everybody wants to praise Tyreek Hill, adding Teron Armstead was gigantic. Tyreek Hill is huge. Now you have Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. The rookie season you alluded to, he broke the rookie reception record. He was great, and he was the only target a lot of the year. Him or Gesicki, that was it. And we had other pieces, but that was pretty much who was featured. And yet you still couldn't cover this guy. It's because he's fast. Now you're going to cover Tyreek Hill and him. These guys are too fast. You can't cover him one-on-one. Now you got 2 of them. Now you got Cedric Wilson coming over from the Cowboys, does the same thing. You forget about that. Eric Akuzama, who's coming out of Texas Tech, been killing it so far in camp. It looks like there's receivers galore. Trent Sherfield showed up big, and now Lynn Bowden and Preston Williams are on the trade block, which leads me to, hey, if we can find a way to get Roquan Smith, hell yeah, go trade for him. Push the chips to the middle of the table. You add another big piece that can be on your team. Big linebacking spot, big linebacking upgrade. Go with Jerome Baker. On the defense, that would be the weak spot right now, but Jerome Baker's a great player. But that would all of a sudden turn to a strength, big time strength. And it'd be hard to find the weak spot if you had a guy like Roquan Smith. Not sure it's going to happen. But like the secondary, like I said, arguably the best in football with Howard and Byron Jones, Holland and Brandon Jones, Javon Holland at safety, Brandon Jones at safety. Maybe one of the best safety duos, definitely the best young safety duo at football. Brandon Jones is one of the best in the league at blitzing from the secondary. He was at the top of the league in sacks out of there, and he has a decent coverage grade. Javon Holland can do it all. He's going to be the best safety in football before you know it. No joke. I can't even say, I know I'm biased, but he do it every level, cover, blitz. He graded out as the 3rd highest safety overall last year. He was a rookie. So obviously he was the top rookie. On the defensive line, Jalen Phillips, 2nd in the rookie class in sacks, killed it. Obviously he's a Cane. I love him. Christian Wilkins, very quietly becoming one of the best defensive tackles in football. He and Zach Seiler actually had a better year. He finished 4th, and Wilkins finished 5th. Seiler's was undrafted, Wilkins' 1st-round pick, finally finding that potential. Emmanuel Ogbah, one of the best overall do-it-all defensive ends in football. Led the league in deflected passes, can get after the quarterback, set the edge on the run. That's not even to mention, like you talked about, Melvin Ingram, when all this guy's got to do, all I've heard is he sets the edge great, but also he gets after the passer. And that's all you got to do is let him pin his ears back, go after the passer, just rush the quarterback, do what you love to do because that's what he's known for. Go get the quarterback. That is huge. And on top of that, I'm pretty excited about Channing Tindall. Our 3rd-round pick was our first pick this year, but the linebacker to Georgia that I didn't think would be there. One of the fastest linebackers coming out of the draft. Love it. The support, everything for Tua is great. And it's an exciting year. It's a very, very exciting year. And I think that the ceiling is right there with the Bills. Remember, the Bills only finished with 11 wins last year. The ceiling is right there. That's who they're after because that's the team that's won. That's the team they need to beat. I think it's easy to say that the Finns are going to lead the league in yards after catch with guys, the weapons they have. They're going to get the ball and they're going to do their thing. We know the Bills have a hell of a time covering Tyreek Hill anyway. So that should help, right? But Melvin Ingram, like I said, super underrated pick. I'm excited. 12-5. I know you said that's your ceiling for him. That's where I have him finishing, but I have him finishing in 2nd.
Wow.
Respect to the Bills. But I have a very interesting thing with the Bills too, as far as the record goes. But I do have them finishing 12-5, the Finns. And with the talent on that team, if everything clicks with Tua, It could be higher than that. If he comes out and balls, all of a sudden you got a well-oiled machine that's how do you stop it? There's too much speed if everything starts clicking. So we'll see. Obviously, but you mentioned it could go the other way, but like you mentioned, it's not there's too much talent. I don't
Yeah,
think there's any way they finished without a winning record. But and they have had a winning record the last 2 years. So 9, 10, 11, just they got to get in the playoffs and you got to make noise.
agreed. They are primed to make a lot of noise, but the Bills are primed to win a Super Bowl. They have a brutal schedule. Obviously, you win your conference, you win your division, you have the toughest schedule ever. I think they're going to go 12-5. Their conference is obviously incredibly tough too, with the Finns taking that step in that direction to become this kind of elite. That like, what are we going to see? Are they elite or whatever? But they have the talent to do so.
The
Despite their
AFC is tough across the board.
yeah, exactly. They're not going to have any easy games. But despite their successes last season, they had massive roster turnover. Have you seen the list of players they lost and added? It's ridiculous.
Yep.
But they made their run game more dynamic, adding James Cook in the draft alongside Devin Singletary. We talked about it all season that they underutilized Devin Singletary every single game. You got to use this guy more often. But their defense is still going to be great. They added Von Miller, some Super Bowl experience. His life's not going to be as easy lining up next to Leonard Floyd and Aaron Donald, but he's still Von Miller. Like he may be aged, but he's still going to bring you something. The 6-year contract is a totally different story, but we'll touch on that another day. Their secondary is still very good, and they're only going to get Tre'Davious White back when he comes back from that ACL. Their offense, obviously, Josh Allen ain't going nowhere. He's still phenomenal. They still have Gabriel Davis. They still have Stephon Diggs are his major targets. He's going to have a phenomenal. It's going to be great. This is a good team. There's a reason why they're the preseason favorites to win the championship or the Super Bowl. Maybe we see some adjustments on the offensive side, losing Brian Dable, but this is still the team to beat, even with their strong schedule.
Yeah. I mean, I got to give it to him. I do like Ken Dorsey a lot. Obviously, he's a Hurricane legend. I like Ken Dorsey being their offensive coordinator. I think that that's going to be an easy transition because he was the quarterback's coach, moves into that role. Brian Dable's gone, but I think it'll be a little more seamless than people think. I mean, you might have a little bit of an adjustment. The big thing is they do lose Levi Wallace. He's gone. How quick does Trey White come back to form as a shutdown corner? And, Kaiir Elam, I like that pick for them in the secondary. But Levi Wallace being gone again, I mentioned it a second ago, but he was kind of boomer bust. He would have a great game or he would be getting picked on. So who knows what we were going to get? The Bills were going to get from him time in and time out. So I think a lot of Bills fans are kind of happy to see him gone. I think James Cook by the end of it will be the top running back there over Singletary or Moss. Yeah. When it's all said and done, I like that pickup. I do like the Gabriel Davis commitment as the number 2 opposite Stephon Diggs. We know that Cole Beasley's gone there now too. I think but Gabriel Davis showed, especially that crazy playoff game against the Chiefs, that was so good. He had a phenomenal game. So I like to see him given that opportunity. I think it's safe to say that this is probably the worst line. I like the Roger Saffold pickup a lot for the Bills, but I think that this is the worst line that Josh Allen has played behind. Now, he's made a habit of figuring that out and making that be okay anyway. He's a mobile quarterback. He moves around. He's an MVP candidate for a reason. And again, he's made that a thing, but eventually guys get tagged. And if you got to move around a lot, not that you always want to stay stationary, but you open yourselves up you want your quarterback to be able to move no matter what and get the first down and make things happen. But the more you do that, and that's a huge part of his game, you expose yourself, and he's done it for years. So does that lead to an injury? Because let's be real, if he gets hurt, that changes absolutely everything for the Bills. So the OJ Howard pickup on offense was another big pickup. I like that, very underrated. I think that the Finns have closed the gap a lot on the Bills. It's eluded them the last 2 years. I think that they'll split with Buffalo this year. I think it's going to be close to the wire. And it really should just be a battle between these two on who wins the division, who's the top team in the division for a long time. Both have solid rosters. Obviously, they have their quarterback. I know a lot of people, the jury's still out on Tua, but the Finns have always had the means and the ability and the aggressiveness. I know with this first round pick that's gone now, it hurts, but at the quarterback draft next year is a big time one. They have great talent. So if they want to go get their guy, they can still do it. They can still package picks, move whatever. They can still move around. They can do what they need to do. But the roster is set up so strong for the Finns that they're still going to be in a good position for a while. And the Bills are too. The Bills are top to bottom. They're great. I have this finishing very similar to what you said because I'm finishing 12-5, and I'm going to do a repeat of what I did in the first thing. I have a tie at the top of the thing. I don't think I did this at all last year for the divisions on tying for the division win, and I did it twice right here. But hey, crazy things happen in the NFL. There's ties that we're not even taking into account yet. At some point, we might have a tie because someone probably will tie. So we might have a tie randomly thrown in there on our division breakdowns or through the week. When we do our prediction week to week, maybe we'll have something like that. But I do give the edge to the Bills just because, hey, they're the champs. You got to get them right now. And I think that they'll finish with the same record and the Bills snag the tiebreaker, but both teams should be in the playoffs. Obviously, that's hard for me to do. I feel like I'm dying inside because I picked the tiebreaker for them to win. But at the same time, I'll give it to them. They're the champs right now in the AFC East, and you got to go through them. So I'm excited. It's going to be a big year, exciting season. Like I mentioned, AFC is going to be stacked across the board, minus injuries that we can't predict. I think it's safe to say the AFC will be better than the NFC for sure. But I want to thank you guys for joining us on the MVP podcast. And next week, we'll have the Souths for you. So a little less exciting football. NFC and AFC South aren't exactly stacked, but we'll have the Souths for you next week as we move closer and closer to the start of the season. I am Jacked, the MVP podcast, and I'm Phil Van Pelt.
I'm Anthony Merrow.
We will see you guys soon.